Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Many of us think New York State's parole system fails to meet its mission because too often it fails to acknowledge that while a committed crime can't be changed, a person who did it can. That's what I'd like to talk about today. Sara Bennett, an expert in post-conviction representation, a former criminal appeals attorney and now a photographer, and Karen Ely, formerly incarcerated and now a paralegal at a New York law firm, are my guests today. Welcome.
Thanks.
So how did the two of you meet?
Well, I met Karen because I was doing a photography project on formerly incarcerated women, and I was looking to photograph somebody before they came out. And so I actually met Karen the day before she was released after 35 years in prison. And I've been following her for her last, I guess you've been out 9 months now?
9.5 months, yes.
And I've known Karen for many years. When did we meet?
I think it was 1984 or 5 in Bedford Hills.
And I was visiting there because I was head of the women's division for Mario Cuomo's cabinet. But were you the head of the...
I was the president of the Inmate Liaison Committee, which is an organization that gathers information from the population and brings it to the superintendent.
So it's the local government. The government,
yeah.
Right, the citizens' government. And you served for 35 years.
Yes, I did, from 1982 until 9.5 months ago.
So let's talk about parole.
Okay.
Your sentence was 25 years to life.
It was.
It was
yes.
a violent crime.
It was a homicide.
A homicide. That's violent, right?
Very.
Anyway, that meant that you were being sentenced 25 years to life, meant that you were eligible to appear before the parole board first time after 25 years.
That's right.
So what does it mean to have to go to the parole board? What do you have to do? Do you have to apply, or do they tell you you're eligible?
No, they schedule you automatically based on the time computation so that you appear 4 months before your earliest possible release date. And you go, you know when you're going. From the first day that you get there, they give you a time comp sheet. So you prepare yourself during the time by doing positive programming, making the most of your time, and compiling sort of a resume so that when you go, you have something to present to the board to prove to them that you've done what you can while you were in to rehabilitate yourself.
So then your day comes. Do you hang that form on your wall?
Well,
Circle it on a calendar.
you know what I did with mine? I put it away.
Yeah.
In 1983, when I got there, they gave me a paper that said 2007, and it was too daunting to look at. And I decided that day to compartmentalize my time to 24 hours. So every day I would get up and say, okay, I'm doing today. I think if I did 2007 every day, I wouldn't have come out okay.
No, I'm sure.
I did it one day, and that way I could tell myself that I was doing as much time as anyone else today.
Right. So then you go to, your appointment is there.
Yeah.
And you go.
You go. And you face 4 people.
You go by yourself?
3 people. You go by yourself. You're not allowed to have someone represent you. You face 3 people who've never met you and who are going by the papers that you've submitted to your counselor ahead of time. And they review what you've said about yourself and what others have said about you in support letters. And then routinely they deny you.
And what is the first thing they ask you?
They ask you to relive the crime. They ask you to go back to that day and say, what were you thinking? What were you doing? And what did you do immediately afterward? And how did you feel? And they don't dwell on anything that you've done to help yourself while you were in or to be society ready at all. They dwell on what made you do this and why did you do it and how did you feel and weren't you thinking about the consequences and why not?
And then, did you think you did well?
I think I did well. I think a first board is rather daunting, more than daunting.
Did you think you might get parole?
No.
Oh, you knew you would. You didn't think.
The political climate was hideous. Governor Pataki had passed an initiative to stop parole for violent felons. In a way, it was a given that anyone violent was going to be denied. And of course, those of us who went, I wasn't the only one who went that day. They gathered us in one room where we waited and kind of supported each other while we were waiting to be called, and came out and cried on each other's shoulders.
How do you get notified that you were denied?
About 4 or 5 days later, you're given a sealed envelope from the area supervisor, usually a sergeant or sometimes your counselor, and you can choose to open it there or go somewhere else with support friends, with a staff person or with a group that you're comfortable with to open it.
So then you have to wait 2 years?
Well, what they call a hit is a denial, and they can re-see you anywhere from 3 months to 2 years from the day
They
you
can.
went. But they customarily choose the maximum.
Do they ever do it on their own?
They sometimes do an 18-month hit or a year hit, but not for violent felons. It's a 2-year hit. You expect it 2 years. So I went in 2007 and was denied, 2009, 2011, 2013, and 2015.
And how did you get it in 2015?
Well, in
2017.
In 2017,
Oh my
I got
goodness,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. What happened was I appealed it each time because I felt that being hit was an irrational decision on the part of the parole commissioners, because they based their entire denial on that I wasn't ready for parole because of the nature of the crime. When I wrote to people and asked for help to appeal my sentence, my parole hit, I didn't get any help.
You didn't write to me or to Sarah?
No, I didn't. I didn't know Sarah.
Not that we could have done a miracle, but anyway, go on.
I think
Sorry.
you have miracles up your sleeve, Ronnie.
No, go.
I wrote to several legal agencies, like Prisoners Legal Services, a lot of the places that help women, and I wasn't chosen to be helped. So I did my own. I trained myself to do research, cite cases, find supporting evidence that my release would be compatible with the welfare of society. And I didn't win my appeal, obviously, I was still in. But the last time I wrote to many places, and Columbia University accepted my case. Brett Dignam has she's a professor at Columbia, has a mass incarceration clinic, and they sent interns to interview me and prepare me for the next parole board, and that's how I got out.
In the 10 years that you spent after when you were eligible for parole, the parole board changed its structure, right?
Slightly. Mario Cuomo, I'm sorry, Andrew Cuomo was elected and appointed new parole commissioners, phasing out some of Pataki's appointees and appointing a little bit different outlook.
But you also didn't see live people, did you?
No, I saw a camera.
Yeah, that's.
We weren't
when
in
did
this-
that happen?
2009 was the last time I saw live people. 2011, 13, 15, and 17.
Did
were
you
on
know that
camera.
it was going to be a camera when you went in?
Yes, and I think that puts us at a disadvantage.
I'm sure it does.
You can't see someone's body language or their entire demeanor without being in the same room.
Yeah. Sarah, you have a reputation for doing very good preparation with people before they go to parole. What's the kind of thing you have to do?
Basically, you have to prep them to learn how to talk about the crime, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Like, nowhere else in your life are you taken back 25 years to, sometimes people were 20 or 25 or 30. It doesn't really matter. But they have to be able to, in a very brief way, say, on such and such a date, I killed so-and-so, mention the person's name, take responsibility for it, talk about how that would never happen again and who they've become. I always say it's like the job interview of your life for people who have never really been on job interviews for the last 25 or 30 years. And it's really hard. It's I don't know, I feel like it's one of the most important parts of the system, and yet people are unrepresented, and it's really stacked against them. It's awful.
Well, it seems awful when you can't tell what you've done, and since it just doesn't make sense.
Well, the thing is when you go to when you're sentenced for the crime that you committed, and the sentencing judge is saying, you know, if you're given 25 to life, if at the end of 25 years, if you have done your time well, then you're ready to come home. What the parole board is essentially doing is resentencing.
They're
so they have,
trying.
well,
Yeah.
they're resentencing is what they've done. So
Yeah.
they've taken on a role of judge, and they're saying, well, your judge actually didn't give you enough, and we are going to give you more. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. But I think what Karen said is true, is that when Governor Pataki came in, sort of the whole parole system changed with this idea from the top down that we're not going to be giving people parole anymore. I think under Governor Cuomo, that's changing, and in the last few months, the statistics are actually better around parole than they've been in a long time.
Much better.
Much better. I mean, it's not like 50% of people are getting paroled or anything, but it's
Like 30%.
I think it's at
isn't it?
30%
Yeah.
now.
But it was at 1 and 2%
Yeah,
Right.
so
when I
it's-
first went to
yeah.
board
Right.
under Pataki.
Right. Now,
And imagine if you go 5 times. Nothing has changed
Yeah.
for you in the last 10 years. What are you going to say?
it's
the same
it's
thing.
violent crimes,
Yeah.
right? And it's such a, what's the word to describe what it is? It's revenge. It's
Yeah,
like an
we-
eye for an eye.
Well, I think it's a little bit about not. I think protecting your own job.
I was
you
going to
know,
say, and
I
a lack
think-
of courage.
I think that's
Right.
really
A
what
lack
it
of
is.
courage on elected officials and the parole board, because,
Well, the parole board is an appointed body and it's an administrative body.
right,
But when they take on that quasi-judicial role that Sarah was saying, they overstep the authority that was invested in them to administratively judge someone's readiness based on their sentence, instead of saying, well, we think the judge was wrong and we think you need more time. If we had a bad disciplinary record while we were in, which is like if you misbehave, do an infraction, there's sets of rules inside. Or I understand that if you can't follow the rules in, it might be not a leap of logic to think that you can't follow society's rules.
right.
But if you followed every rule while you were in and you've programmed successfully and even started programs or helped others to understand by sharing your own experience that this is what I did, don't do what I did.
And the figures show that recidivism of people who've committed violent crimes is the lowest of all categories, right?
Right.
And people who have served long terms, the long termers we call them,
That's what we did call
Yeah.
them.
are no longer in the younger category.
Right. They've aged out of crime.
They've aged out.
But mostly people who've spent that amount of time in prison, they're all doing like amazing things, you know, with their time, how they're living their lives, whether they're, you know, the cook who cooks for 700 people in the facility, or whether they're
You were a cook, weren't you?
I was for a while, yeah. I was.
Or whether they do legal stuff, like Karen did a lot of legal work for people, or like Judy Clark, who we've talked about many times here before, who, you know, does the puppies and
amazing work with children and families.
Right, exactly. You know, you can't undo what you've done in your past. None of us can.
And lots of people in prison develop very original but good things. I mean, they even start
They do.
communications and decide to pay attention to the problem of children visiting and all that kind of stuff, right?
And I would say even if people have some disciplinary, I think it's amazing that people don't have much disciplinary because there are so many rules and it's so arbitrary, right?
It's hard.
Yeah, it's
I
very-
had some disciplinary,
Yeah, it's
but
very
minor.
hard not to. Yeah, but it's hard not to.
Like being in the wrong place at the wrong time because I was late for an appointment, or not obeying a direct order quickly enough, that kind of stuff. But
Altering
never
your
anything.
clothes, you know.
No
not-
insurrection.
Never insurrection. No.
So you're on parole.
I am.
And what does that mean?
Well,
That's
right
a different
now-
thing from the parole board.
Yes. Those are the parole commissioners that say, yes, you can go. But right now, I have a parole officer supervising my activities. And basically, I'm required to report to her. It's a woman. And she's in Manhattan, right opposite Port Authority on 40th Street. And I go there every 2 weeks and wait in line, and I'm processed in. And when I get inside, she asks me what's changed, any contact with police, any job change, address change, any drug use, any incidents that I should know about. And I'm required to be honest and tell her yes, no, but I've never had any infractions. And I
Did
think
you
I
need permission to come on the program?
no. No, I can travel within the 5 boroughs. In fact, with my job as a paralegal, I go everywhere. I go to the courthouses every day. And somebody who's been involved in the judicial system and the legal system for 35 years, I never wanted to see another attorney, judge, or courtroom again. But I'm in them every day. I'm going to one when I leave here. It's to look up somebody's records. But it's a matter of a different way of looking at it. Now I do it in a productive way to help others.
And you have to pay the parole officer.
I do. I have a parole supervision fee. We are required to pay as we're able. If I were unemployed, I wouldn't be required to pay. Now, as soon as I became employed, which was right away as soon as I came home, I pay them. It's a maximum of $30 a month. And you can pay on a sliding scale. If you're not able to pay the 30, you can pay 10, 20, or as you can. I've paid $30 a month since I've been home.
And it's better to pay because down the line when you want to get off parole, if you've been paying, it kind of shows that you're doing.
Do you get the money back?
No, you don't.
No, you don't get the money back, but it certainly is a small price to pay compared to where I've been.
Yeah. Where does the money go, I wonder? Into the general revenue?
They say it goes to the Crime Victims Board.
That's interesting.
You forgot to say you have a curfew.
Oh, yes, I did forget that. My curfew is from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., so I cannot leave my residence before 7 a.m., and I have to be in my residence by 9. So in the morning, I leave around 7:10, 7:15.
And if you had enough money to rent your own apartment, how would they know that you're in your residence at that hour?
Well, they can drop in, and they do drop in. They show up sometimes at 9:05 or 10 of 9 at night. They show up at midnight if they want to.
So it's not an easy job for them either.
I imagine that it's very difficult. I think that having an easy parolee is a blessing for them because they know that if they know you're going to be there or they know that you're not going to dabble in anything illegal.
So there's been recent discussion about returning people who violate parole.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people being returned, right? Although the governor and other people, the district attorney, I mean, the general consensus is we should stop that to an extent.
Yeah, because they're violating people for things that everybody else does on a daily basis. You know, like we come and go as we want, right? If you're a few minutes late, you shouldn't be violated. If you have a drink, maybe you shouldn't be violated. I don't know. I mean, it's just very.
I won't do any of that.
No, I know, but it's like minor things as people are trying to reintegrate in their lives. You know, people are not actually supposed to associate with other felons, and yet that could be other family members, or that's who their friends are. You know, it's just.
So they can't, if
Well, there are other felons who live in the house where I
you
live.
can't,
Well,
Yes.
in that case,
In
you're-
that case, it's
you
an
get
acceptable
something.
thing.
Right.
I see.
But to go out to lunch or fraternize in some way, other than an incidental meeting, is prohibited.
well, if somebody in your family is another ex-felon and you want to live with that family, you can't?
It probably wouldn't happen for a while. And it would only happen if you got permission from your parole officer and they would monitor you a little bit more
And they would have
closely.
to get permission from their parole officer.
Yeah, yes.
It's
yes.
a kind of mess. So in efforts to reduce the population in prison, we went full steam ahead with drug offenses, right? And some drug offenses are felonies, but they're nonviolent felonies, but some are violent felonies. But nonviolent felonies for drugs were out mostly.
Well, you're talking about the Rockefeller drug laws, basically?
Yeah, after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the really heavy.
I mean, the
Well,
state of New York lowered the population
Right, because they lowered the sentences.
Yeah.
That's why. They changed the sentencing structure around.
from the Rockefeller drug laws.
Yeah.
Right.
I see.
So,
So,
when you talk about parole violators, the statistics show that occasionally a violent felon will return, but nobody for domestic violence.
that's
a
interesting.
It was a matter of a person who's been pushed to the wall and then finally snaps, and it won't happen again.
And it could happen to anybody.
It could.
You know, that's so we're now narrowing the field. So we've got people who violate parole and they go back to prison. We've got people serving long terms with the likelihood of their ever committing another crime still living in prison. right?
Right, and being denied parole over and over and over again.
And they tend to be the violent crimes.
That's true.
Well, that's exactly who they would be, because
Yeah.
they're the people with the life sentences.
How much money do you think we'd save?
Well,
a lot of money.
I've read that, I just read a report the other day. It's now, I think it's $56,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. I also read that we have the highest, I think it's in the country, ratio of prison guards to,
New York.
yeah,
Well,
prisoners.
that's
I
a whole
think,
nother
yeah,
subject, the
yeah.
political power of the
Yeah,
prison guards and the economic power
Yeah,
of communities.
yeah.
It is an industrial complex, isn't it?
It is, but also automatically when you say 58,000,
I think it's 56.
56,000 a year, but as an inmate ages,
Oh,
say
then
in my
it's, yeah,
case,
it's very
the price
expensive.
goes
I
up.
cost them more than the average 30-year-old.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we have people in wheelchairs and
Right.
people who
I think
do.
it's several $100,000 a year for somebody who's elderly.
So the
and sick.
country has almost, over 2 million people incarcerated at
Mm-hmm.
a time, right? And although we have 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the population
Of
incarcerated.
incarcerated.
So we tend to incarcerate more people. We tend to have longer terms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what else do we do? We have an enormous amount of people who
We
are
treat them-
on parole or probation at the same time. I think it's estimated 5 million people. And then the figure that goes for anybody who has a criminal record is way up. I don't know how much, but it's enormous. It's shocking.
And then it does impact on your ability to get a decent job when you come home if you have a conviction, a felony conviction.
It's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible.
So have
I
we
was
now erased the check the
severely
box?
blessed
Was
by
check the box successful?
Well,
No, the ban the box has been
Ban the-
passed, yes.
yeah.
They don't,
but it's only
but-
successful in the first instant. In other
Right.
words, when you go to your job
Yeah, right.
interview,
You're not automatically,
excluded, but after you've passed your job interview, they can still do a background check.
this is all on the application for
It's all
employment.
in
Yeah.
Executive Law 23A, and they do a second review after your initial acceptance, and they can hold your acceptance in abeyance
Right.
based on the review.
And we all know what the problem is of getting jobs when you're a little older.
Yes.
So, but I don't know how they could change that. That would be a difficult thing to,
I think that they need more people who have
a skill.
more acceptance outlook of I think you have some talent, and I think I can use you, and I think you could be an asset. And to find an employer who has that open heart and open mind is a rare thing.
And along with that, a skill to help.
Well, almost everybody in prison develops some kind of skill
Yes,
or
we
other.
do.
And one of the things I've noticed from spending a lot of time with formerly incarcerated women, because I've been photographing them, is they always seem to like show up on time or early. Amazing workers, because in prison people are working hard. That's how they're passing time. Incredibly reliable, grateful, enthusiastic. I mean, I think that people who do hire formerly incarcerated people are really happy, and with the workers who
You were a
are
pro
hired.
bono attorney for Judy Clark, who is still in prison, was rejected for parole the first time. But what made you switch to the women coming out? You're particularly drawn to women in prison, incarcerated.
Well, I think when I was a lawyer, a lot of my clients were women. I tended to have a practice that had a lot of battered women who killed their abusers. That was sort of my specialty for a long time. Not that many people are working with women in prison, so even in the photography field, I feel like I'm one of the few who is photographing women.
And we want people to understand what a person is like who's in prison. It's not a demon, and it's not somebody that you have to keep out of society. It could be you or me.
Right. I just wanted
And
to
it
show
could
what
be
people
Karen.
what people look
Really.
like. That people are just like us. You
Yeah.
know. And-
So, are they, do you think?
They are.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. We love each other. I wake up every morning grateful for the sun that comes in my window.
This is the first day of the rest of your life?
It
Is that
is.
the expression?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound corny, but it's a blessing every day.
And what do you hope? I mean, you want to support people who are
I
helping
want to see
other
the rest
people,
of my sisters come home.
and you're going to help us.
Yes.
One way or another.
she
I
is.
hope so.
It's a difficult, but I think if we can bring people like you here and show people what you're like, that people have to be understanding of what happened. I mean, we have very few women in prison who regularly went out to do anything.
No, very few.
We have to be careful that also that we're not going to, you know, there's been too much distinction between the violence and the nonviolence, and I don't think we can make the same distinction. I don't want to make the same distinction between the women and men either, because the long-term men are in the same kind of position,
least likely to recidivate.
the least likely also to come out, and also, you know, are very, you know, loving elders. You know,
so we want empathy, forgiveness,
understanding, and just a different way of looking. I mean, we've talked about this so many times, but the United States incarcerates for way longer than anyone else. I mean, after people have done a certain amount of time, let's say 10 years, they're ready to come home. Well, that's just the reality.
Well, I'm grateful for you for helping people, and I'm so pleased that you're here to join us.
And I'm so honored to have been invited. Thank you.
Please, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ronnie.
We're at the end. We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.